Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Are You In? Now, I'm excited because the days are getting longer, which means spring is just around the corner, though we do have to endure another nor'easter tomorrow. Once that hits, hopefully after that, we can finally usher in spring. So I'm excited. Uh, More energy, all that good stuff. Hope you guys are all enjoying the weather, at least for today, and hopefully you are all prepared for the nor'easter tomorrow. Anyways, for today, I am reviewing the last album from 2016 that I really wanted to talk about. Um, this one just missed my top 10, that's why I didn't get a chance to talk about it. But I am today, and I'm really excited to talk about it. And without further ado, I am reviewing Two Door Cinema Club's latest album, Gameshow. Now, for those of you who don't know who Two Door Cinema Club are, they're an indie rock slash pop band from Northern Ireland, particularly County Down. The key members include Alex Trimble on lead vocals and rhythm and guitar, Sam Halliday on lead guitar and backing vocals, and Kevin Byard on bass guitar, synthesizers, keyboards, and backing vocals as well. So they've had two previous albums, one in 2010 called Tourist History, and the other one in 2012 called Beacon. I first heard of them from their single What You Know from their first album, though I've never listened to the full album itself. And hopefully eventually someday I will do that because I have no idea why I haven't done it yet. When I found out about their second album, Beacon, I was very interested in it, and I listened to it and loved it. It was one of my top 25 albums of 2012. Such an interesting sound for indie rock, and I love Trimble's voice. And they had a lot of interesting arrangements on the album. So definitely one of my favorite indie rock CDs in general in a very long time. So when I heard about Gameshow, which dropped right on my birthday, I was really excited for it, and I was curious to see what this album has in store. So, why do I like this CD so much? I'll give you the pros and the cons, of course. So the first things that really stand out on this album is it's more of a funky type of sound. If there is something called indie funk, this would definitely fit that bill. Right from the get-go, you have a song called Are We Ready, which was the first single off of the album, with a very interesting feel, a little bit ominous, but also really funky in general. Once you get to the second verse and chorus, and it's an interesting single. It's not like it doesn't. It's not like hugely different from any indie single that you probably heard. But like in terms of them, it was a very different sound, and I'm really glad that this particular song was the first single off the album. It's one of my favorite songs on the album, if not my favorite. Some just really cool ideas, some really cool harmonies. The last chorus itself throws both the pre-chorus and the chorus ideas together. So it makes some good melody, counter melody ideas. I just love the drums on this. I love the bass part on this, and also just in general a really cool music video if you get a chance to watch it. This song talks about the idea of consumerism in the social media age, and just the adverse effects of that. The music video falls in suit where it's the three members doing like commercials, and like all the commercials are products that are lines in the song. So that's a cool one with the funky ideas, and it just like opens up the CD in an interesting way because I didn't expect a more funk kind of sound from them. And that just keeps going throughout the CD. You have Bad Decisions, which is another single that is very funky as well. I mean, throughout it, it's basically funk throughout the whole entire time. Ordinary is very funky. Uh, Fever is very funky. Uh, Good Morning, somewhat funky. Surgery, definitely funky. And Je viens de là is also uh, very funky. Just overall, most of the CD has a funk feel to it. There's only a couple songs that I could have seen on Beacon. Uh, Definitely, Game Show is one of those that definitely has more of that indie rock feel. Um, as well as Good Morning kind of fits that mold of I could have seen it on Beacon as well. Uh, but overall, it is its own It's a departure from the sound that you have heard on Beacon, and potentially also Taurus History. Though again, I'm not exactly sure how different Taurus History is from Beacon. The second big thing that stands out to me is Trimble's voice on this album, specifically the power behind his voice. Um, Now on Beacon, he had more of a softer chest voice, and that contributed to a softer head voice. He has a great voice. Just I never really thought of it as a powerful voice. But from the get go, you feel the power in a lot of his vocals. On Are We Ready? His chest voice during the chorus and the pre-chorus definitely stand out much more than on any of the songs on Beacon. Bad Decisions, you hear his falsetto, and it goes insanely high on a lot of stuff. Like not on this song, but when we get further on into the CD, he hits some very high falsetto so clearly. And I think the nice thing about it is the funk aspects work so well with his voice. The more powerful stuff and faster, more energetic stuff that's on here complements his powerful range on this CD. Bad Decisions, you hear a lot of great falsetto on there. Fever, you have some powerful falsetto in the choruses. Invincible, this very vulnerable song that highlights his falsetto in such a great way. Good Morning, even in the choruses, you still feel the powerful falsetto. Surgery, not the best of songs, but still, he hits a high G in his falsetto, which is like an octave above a usual chest voice can go. And then Je viens de là is the only real one that it feels a little strained, but it's also because he's hitting a F sharp consistently during the chorus. An F sharp / E in his falsetto, and there's a lot of moving lines, and because of that, it's a little bit harder to sustain that falsetto, and it sounds like it's a little bit scratchy, but it's just more of the fact that he's putting so much effort into that, and like I commend it. It's nice to hear a very powerful falsetto work so well on an album, and it just complements a lot of these songs, which in general, Bad Decisions, an awesome single, like I said, which works so well because throughout most of it he is using that falsetto, and it just works so well over the beat. And I'm just gonna quickly throw out something really cool that I thought was really nice, is that a lot of these songs have some interesting progressions in there that I just think are work very well and break up the monotony of sometimes the sound, because again, a lot of these songs do sound similar in the feel. So like, for example, in Bad Decisions, you have this little progression in the chorus where it goes from F to C minor to B flat, and that repeats itself a couple times, and then you go D minor to E flat, which to me is a very interesting progression. Ordinary, another song that has a little nice pre-chorus chord progression of F sharp, A, E, F sharp, A, B, C sharp, and just really works to pad out the song and its ideas, while this other melody is weaving through it, and to me, I really like that progression as well. Even Invincible, which has one of the honestly the cooler progressions on the album. You got it throughout most of it. You have F and then C over E, which is a C chord with an E on the bass. C minor over E flat. Then you have D sus to D7, G minor, A minor to an E flat 7. Now, for those of you who don't know, that jump, it's a tritone jump, which is a diminished fifth, which is technically the equal distance in a scale, like in a chromatic scale, a 6 and a 6, you would get that tritone. So it's a cool, interesting color change in the middle of all of that. So like, even though it's very funky and borderline some poppy at some points, there are some really cool ideas in there. And just quickly to wrap up, Trimble's voice on this, even on the songs that sound a little bit like it could have been on Beacon, for example, Gameshow, it shows also where his voice has come from, because when he sings the chorus, it's all chest voice on something that probably would have been a little bit more head voice on a previous album, but it's just the power of it works so well. Even if the verses are a little bit more softer sound like he usually does, it doesn't take away from the idea of how his voice has developed, and it's just cool to see the journey from that. Even on Good Morning, the other one that kind of feels like it could have been on Beacon, you still feel that falsetto in there, and he even goes up to a high C on there. So even when it sounds similar, it's different because of just how much he has progressed as a singer. So a lot of really cool stuff. One other highlight on this album that really shows off the difference in the sound that can happen, as well as Trimble's power, is Invincible. It is the most vulnerable song on the album, talking about somebody who was in a relationship with somebody and took it for granted and saw the error of his ways and wants this person back, and finding any single way that he can to get this person back. It's definitely a relatable song. And the way that it's set up, very sparse in the beginning, that grows and grows and grows until the end, and this awesome progression, as well as the power of Trimble's voice, makes it a very vulnerable moment, when it's been a lot of just funky songs and good energy and nice beats and everything like that. So another standout song on this album, and in general, a lot of these songs are really good. Even when they are a little bit lackluster an idea, if it starts to sound similar than a previous song, it's not that these songs are ever bad. It's just sometimes the feel itself tends to stay its welcome. That particularly hits on the technically last song on the standard album, Je viens de là, which is basically a French term for I come from there. And it's an all right song, but the problem that happens is it doesn't bring anything new to the table after hearing 6 or 7 songs that sound very similar. For me, this is the most forgettable song on the album, but it's not a bad song. It's just you're getting to the point like, cool, this was the perfect time to end the CD, because if you've done a couple more songs like that, it may have started becoming stale or worn out. So at least it seems like they know, like, hey, this was a good time to call it quits. The bigger thing that is a detriment to it, if you will, is twofold. The choruses are addictive, and they're very good, and they're very interesting in terms of melody and the way that the melody overlaps on the chord progressions. The verses aren't always the most interesting. like on Surgery. That one in particular, not so interesting. You also have Good Morning. Doesn't start out great. Um, Fever is all right starting out. Um, Lavender isn't so interesting on verse verse in terms of chorus, and that sometimes becomes a problem if you're trying to make the chorus your selling point. You can't always have the verses be not as strong. You know, you got to have some interest in the verses so that it pulls you to the chorus, because the chorus, of course, is a very important part, but it's only, maybe a third of the song or maybe a half of the song. You still have another half to make someone interested in. So that is somewhat of a detriment to me, as well as the lyrics themselves aren't always interesting. They're not bad. It's just not always great, and sometimes borderline repetitive or borderline like a thematic dissonance, if you will. Like this idea of like, I'll give you an example of Game Show. Game Show, it doesn't really seem to have a theme or a readable theme, like a very reachable one. It seems more of like a lot of imagery and metaphor just to have imagery and metaphor, which is all right. I mean, the Beatles have done that. A lot of bands have done it. It just, for me, it's like I don't necessarily know what this song's about. Another one is honestly, Surgery is probably the worst offender of this, because talking about repetition, it just keeps going. There's you look at me, I look at you, tell me what you think we're going to get up to, and then you look at me, I look at you, what do you think we're going to do? First off, that's a very repetitive line in general, but second, it repeats almost all the time in the song, and then the verses aren't very strong, which destroys which lessens a song with a really cool beat and a really cool chorus and a really cool harmonies. So there are certain songs on here that the music is great, but the lyrics keep it from being an amazing song, and I think that's why I left it out of my top 10. Is that like there's a lot of very solid songs and a few great songs, but then there's ones that like were just a little bit more polished. Would have been this would definitely have been in my top 10 if there was a little bit more polish on the verses and on the lyrics. So that in particular for me is what brings it down a little bit. Now, if you're going to listen to this CD, I recommend the deluxe version up until the remixes. The remixes don't really bring much to it. You get two remixes of Bad Decisions and Ordinary. They're not bad, it's just I don't ever listen to them. I would say more to listen to the other two songs that didn't make the album. One that I can definitely see why it didn't, and then the other one could have worked to at least change the tone of some of this a little bit more. So Gasoline has an interesting sound, has some good energy, and it's a little bit slower pace with a little bit more heavy feel, with some good harmonies. It's just I can see why it was a bonus song, if you will. Sucker, though, has a really cool feel. I would say it's kind of like a morose carnival, if you will, like a very slow, but like at the same time kind of playful kind of song. And it works well because the lyrics themselves flow really well over the top of it in terms of rhythm and idea. And I personally would have loved to see this on the album. I probably would have taken this one off and either taken off Lavender. I mean, put this one on, either taken off Lavender or probably Je viens de là. One of the two, just so it could have balanced it out a little bit more. So overall, fun CD. I would recommend this to basically anyone who is in the indie scene, but also just someone trying to start out on this, because this is very approachable to a lot of people in the mainstream in general. very approachable and indie. I don't know if I would necessarily call this indie rock. I would call it more of an indie funk rock, if there is something like that. Again, I'm not huge on the indie scene, so I don't know exactly if there is a term like that, but that would be the closest thing that I would call it. Um, in terms of Two Door Cinema Club fans, I would still recommend this, just to see the progression in Trimble's voice and to see what new style they have, but also understand that it might not be like, if you love Beacon, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to love this one. I personally do, but the change in style may not work for you. But overall, I do recommend this to anybody. It was right on the edge of my top 10 of 2016, and at one point I believe was in it until I had to drop it down for another album. Looking back at it, I may still would have put this in my top 10 looking back, now that it's been a year, but there are little things that just make it borderline top 10 rather than a solid top 10 album. So that's my review. I hope you enjoyed it. This is my last one for 2016, unless you have other ones that you would like me to review. And of course, I'm always fluid, so I might throw another one out there at some point in time. But now I'm going to be focusing just more on a couple of albums from 2017 that I did not get to review, or ones I want to review more in depth for my top 50 list. Albums from 2018, and I'm going to try to start doing these discography reviews very shortly. I'm just listening to a lot of different music at this time. So, to keep in update of what I'm doing, of course, like this video so that I know that you liked what I do. Comment on albums that you would like me to review, as well as other things I can do better for the future. Subscribe to my channel so that you can at least know what I'm doing. And of course, another way that you can do that is by pressing the bell icon on the channel, so that way you do get notified on the stuff that I am doing. You can share this with your friends, see if there's people that would like this as much as you do. And of course, just stay tuned for what I have next. I am looking to put out a cover song either Wednesday or Thursday, so keep checking back and seeing what happens. And then, of course, I'll have another RUN this weekend. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.